Cassandra Mitchell had always believed the ocean held more mysteries than any human heart could contain. At 27, she had devoted herself entirely to understanding the magnificent humpback whales that migrated along the rocky coast of Maine each year. Her colleagues at the Coastal Marine Research Center knew her as Cassie, the quiet scientist who preferred the company of marine mammals to crowded conferences or social gatherings. The morning began like countless others before it. Cassie stood on the observation deck of the research vessel, her honey blonde hair pulled back in a practical braid. Binoculars pressed against her eyes as she tracked a pod of whales moving through the gray-blue waters. The salt air filled her lungs, and for a moment, everything felt perfectly aligned with her purpose. She had spent 5 years documenting whale songs, migration patterns, and feeding behaviors. This work gave her life meaning. Even if it left little room for anything else, an unexpected visitor, the sound of footsteps on the metal deck, made Cassie turn around. Her research partner, Thomas Green, was approaching with an unusual spring in his step. Thomas was a practical man in his 50s, someone who rarely showed excitement about anything beyond scientific data. "Cassie, we have a visitor," Thomas announced, barely containing his enthusiasm. "Julian Westbrook just arrived at the dock. He wants to tour our facility and discuss our research." Cassie felt her stomach tighten. Julian Westbrook was a name everyone in the scientific community knew, even those who tried to avoid the business world. At 34, he had built Westbrook Technologies into a global empire, revolutionizing renewable energy systems and sustainable technology. His face appeared on magazine covers, and his philanthropic efforts were legendary. But Cassie had never paid much attention to those stories. She preferred facts about whale populations over celebrity businessmen. "Why would someone like him be interested in our small research station?" Cassie asked, feeling suddenly self-conscious about her practical work clothes and windswept appearance. Thomas grinned. "Apparently, he read your paper on whale communication patterns and their relationship to ocean health. He wants to discuss potential funding for expansion of our research." Cassie's heart began racing, though she told herself it was simply professional excitement. Funding was always scarce, and the chance to expand their work could mean protecting more marine habitats. She had no reason to feel nervous about meeting a businessman. Regardless of his reputation or success, the meeting that changed everything 20 minutes later. Cassie found herself in the research center's small conference room, which suddenly felt inadequate for hosting someone of Julian Westbrook's stature. She had quickly changed into a clean sweater and jeans. Though she still felt underdressed and unprepared, when Julian walked through the door, Cassie understood immediately why his presence commanded attention. He stood tall, with dark hair that held just a touch of gray at the temples, giving him an air of distinguished maturity. His eyes were a striking gray-green, like the ocean on a stormy day, and they held an intelligence that went beyond business acumen. He wore casual clothing, a navy sweater, and khaki pants, which somehow made him seem more approachable than the suited businessman she had imagined. "Dr. Mitchell," Julian said, extending his hand with a warm smile. "Thank you for taking the time to meet with me. Your research on humpback whale vocalizations is remarkable." Cassie shook his hand, surprised by the genuine enthusiasm in his voice. His grip was firm but not overpowering, and she felt an unexpected warmth spread through her at the contact. "Thank you, Mr. Westbrook. I'm honored that you took the time to read my work." "Please call me Julian," he said, settling into a chair across from her. "And I didn't just read it. I've been following your research for the past year. The way you've connected whale communication to ocean ecosystem health is groundbreaking." As they began discussing her work, Cassie felt her initial nervousness fade. Julian asked thoughtful questions that showed he genuinely understood the scientific concepts. He listened intently when she spoke about the challenges of marine conservation, the threats facing whale populations, and her dreams of expanding their monitoring systems along the entire eastern seaboard. Unexpected connections. The conversation that was supposed to last 30 minutes stretched into 2 hours. Thomas had quietly excused himself, leaving Cassie and Julian alone in the conference room. The afternoon sun streamed through the windows, casting golden light across the scattered research papers and whale photographs that covered the table between them. "What made you choose this path?" Julian asked, his gray-green eyes studying her with genuine curiosity. Marine biology is important work, but it requires incredible dedication and often means sacrificing other aspects of life. Cassie felt heat rise to her cheeks at the personal nature of his question. She had been asked about her career choice countless times, but something about the way Julian asked made it feel different, more intimate. "The ocean never judges you," she said quietly, surprised by her own honesty. "When I was younger, I always felt like I didn't quite fit in with other people. I was too quiet, too serious, too focused on things that seemed strange to my peers. But in the water, studying these magnificent creatures, I found a place where being different was actually an advantage. My patience, my attention to detail, my preference for observation over conversation, all of it became valuable." Julian nodded slowly, something flickering in his eyes that looked almost like recognition. "I understand that feeling more than you might think. Success in business often means you're surrounded by people, but it can be profoundly lonely when you're never quite sure if they see you or just what you represent." The vulnerability in his admission surprised Cassie. She had expected a powerful businessman to project confidence and certainty, not to share such honest reflections about loneliness and authenticity. As their eyes met across the table, Cassie felt something shift in the air between them, an awareness that this conversation had moved beyond professional boundaries into something more personal and potentially dangerous to her carefully ordered life. 3 days after their initial meeting, Cassie found herself accepting an invitation she never would have considered before. Julian had called personally to invite her to dinner at a quiet restaurant overlooking the harbor he claimed they needed, to discuss the specifics of the research funding. But something in his voice suggested there was more to this meeting than business arrangements. Cassie stood in front of her bedroom mirror, feeling like a stranger to herself. She had chosen a simple emerald dress that brought out the green flecks in her hazel eyes. Her hair fell in soft waves around her shoulders instead of the usual practical braid. The transformation was subtle but significant, and it reflected the internal changes she had been experiencing since meeting Julian Westbrook. The restaurant was intimate and elegant, with candlelight reflecting off the water visible through large windows. Julian was already waiting at a secluded table when Cassie arrived. He stood as she approached, and the appreciation in his eyes made her feel beautiful in a way she had never experienced before. "You look stunning, Cassie," Julian said, his voice carrying a warmth that sent shivers down her spine. They ordered dinner, but Cassie barely tasted the food. The conversation flowed easily, moving from marine conservation to childhood memories, from philosophical questions about purpose to shared experiences of feeling different from others. Julian spoke about growing up with enormous pressure to succeed, about building his company from nothing, and about the emptiness that often accompanied success. A dangerous proposition as their plates were cleared away and coffee arrived. Julian's demeanor shifted. Cassie noticed a tension in his shoulders, a nervousness that seemed out of character for someone usually so composed. "Cassie, there's something I need to discuss with you," Julian began, his gray-green eyes meeting hers with startling intensity. "What I'm about to propose might sound completely irrational, but I'm asking you to hear me out completely before responding." Cassie's heart began to pound. She nodded, unable to find her voice. "I've reached a point in my life where professional success feels hollow without personal fulfillment," Julian continued. "I've always wanted to be a father, to build a family, but my experiences with relationships have been deeply disappointing. Most women I've met are attracted to my wealth and status rather than who I am as a person." Cassie listened, her hands gripping her coffee cup as she tried to understand where this conversation was leading. "I've been considering alternative paths to parenthood," Julian said carefully. "Surrogacy, adoption, various arrangements that would allow me to have a child without the complications of traditional relationships. But then I met you, and everything changed." "Julian, I don't understand," Cassie whispered. Though part of her was beginning to comprehend the direction of his words, he leaned forward, his gaze never leaving hers. "In our conversations, I've discovered something rare and precious. You're brilliant, compassionate, genuine, and completely unaffected by material wealth. You have integrity and depth that I've never encountered before, and I believe you would be an extraordinary mother." Cassie's breath caught in her throat. What exactly are you asking me? I'm proposing that we have a child together, Julian said, his voice steady, despite the audacity of his words. Not through a clinical arrangement, but as partners who respect and care for each other. We would share parenting responsibilities, and I would ensure that both you and our child would never want for anything. You could continue your research with unlimited resources and support. Our child would have two parents who genuinely value each other. The proposal hung in the air between them, impossible and tempting in equal measure. Cassie felt her carefully constructed world tilting on its axis. Confessions encouraged Julian. This is beyond unconventional, Cassie managed to say, her voice trembling. We barely know each other. How could we possibly consider something so significant? We know the important things, Julian countered gently. We know we trust each other. We know we share fundamental values about what matters in life. And we both know there's an attraction between us that neither of us can ignore. Cassie felt her cheeks burn at his directness. The attraction was undeniable. Every time Julian's hand had accidentally brushed hers, every moment their eyes had met across the table, she had felt something electric and terrifying. At 27, she had never experienced anything like this intensity of feeling. There are things about me you don't know, Cassie said quietly, feeling vulnerable and exposed. Things that might change your perspective entirely. I've spent my whole life focused on my work. I've never been in a serious relationship. I've never even been intimate with anyone. I'm not the worldly, sophisticated woman you might imagine. Instead of the shock or disappointment she expected, Julian's expression softened with something that looked like wonder. Cassie, that doesn't diminish you in any way. If anything, it makes you even more remarkable. In a world where authenticity is rare, you've preserved something beautiful and precious. But how would this even work practically? Cassie asked, her scientific mind trying to impose order on the chaos of emotions swirling inside her. We could take whatever approach makes you comfortable, Julian said. If you prefer, we could use medical assistance. Or, if feelings develop between us naturally, we could allow our relationship to progress organically at whatever pace feels right to you. The implications of his words sent warmth flooding through Cassie's body. The idea of physical intimacy with Julian both terrified and excited her in ways she had never imagined possible. A decision point. I need time to think about this, Cassie finally said, her voice barely audible above the soft background music in the restaurant. Take all the time you need, Julian replied, reaching across the table to gently cover her hand with his. The contact sent electricity racing up her arm. But Cassie, regardless of what you decide, I want you to know that you've already changed something fundamental in me. For the first time in years, I feel genuine hope about the future. As Julian drove her home that evening, Cassie's mind raced with possibilities and fears. The proposal defied logic and contradicted everything she had planned for her life. But she couldn't deny that Julian Westbrook had awakened something in her that she never knew existed. A longing for connection, for love, the possibility of creating a family with someone who truly saw and valued her. That night, lying in bed and listening to the distant sound of waves against the shore, Cassie confronted the truth she had been avoiding. Her carefully ordered, safe life suddenly felt incomplete. Julian had shown her a glimpse of something more, something thrilling and terrifying and utterly transformative. The question that haunted her, sleep finally came, was whether she possessed the courage to embrace such an enormous change, and whether her inexperienced heart could survive the intensity of feelings that Julian had awakened in her. For 5 days, Cassie wrestled with Julian's proposition. She threw herself into her research with renewed intensity, spending long hours on the observation deck, tracking whale movements, as if the rhythmic patterns of marine life could somehow provide answers to her human dilemma. But every time she surfaced from her work, her thoughts returned to the way Julian's eyes had held hers, to the gentleness in his voice when he spoke about building a family, to the electric awareness that hummed between them. Thomas noticed her distraction immediately. You've been staring at that same data set for 20 minutes without recording anything, he observed one afternoon, concern evident in his voice. Does this have something to do with Julian Westbrook? Cassie looked up, startled. What makes you ask that? Thomas smiled knowingly. Because he's called the research center 3 times in the past 5 days, always asking if you're available to talk. And because I've never seen you this unsettled by anything that wasn't related to endangered whale populations that evening. Cassie finally allowed herself to acknowledge what her heart had been trying to tell her mind. She was terrified of Julian's proposal. She was even more terrified of living her entire life in the safe, predictable patterns she had constructed. Julian represented risk and uncertainty, but he also represented possibility, connection, and a chance at something extraordinary. She called him that night, her hands trembling as she dialed his number. Cassie Julian answered on the first ring, and she could hear the mixture of hope and anxiety in his voice. "Can we meet tomorrow?" she asked. "There's something I need to tell you." Taking the leap, they met at a secluded beach near the research center, where the autumn sun cast golden light across the sand and the sound of waves provided a soothing rhythm to their conversation. Julian arrived wearing jeans and a cable-knit sweater, looking more relaxed than Cassie had ever seen him. But his gray-green eyes held an intensity that made her pulse quicken. "I've been thinking about your proposal constantly," Cassie began, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "It goes against every logical, rational part of my mind. We've known each other less than 2 weeks. What you're suggesting is completely unconventional and possibly insane." Julian's expression remained neutral, but Cassie saw his hands clench slightly at his sides, betraying his tension. "But I've spent my entire life being logical and rational," Cassie continued. "I've built a safe, predictable existence where I never take emotional risks. And meeting you has made me realize that maybe the biggest risk is never allowing myself to feel deeply, never opening myself to the possibility of real connection." "What are you saying?" Julian asked, taking a step closer to her. Cassie took a deep breath, feeling as if she were standing at the edge of a cliff, ready to jump into unknown waters. "I'm saying yes. I want to try this, whatever this becomes. I want to take this leap with you." Transformation in Julian's face was immediate and profound. Joy and relief flooded his features, making him look younger and more vulnerable than she had ever seen him. He closed the distance between them in 2 quick strides, and then his hands were cupping her face with infinite gentleness. "Are you sure?" he whispered, his eyes searching hers. "I need to know you're absolutely certain. Because once we start this journey, Cassie, I'm going to fall completely and irrevocably in love with you," instead of answering with words. Cassie rose on her toes and pressed her lips to his. It was clumsy and inexperienced, nothing like the passionate kisses she had read about in books. But the moment their lips touched, something profound shifted in the universe. A love beyond planning. Julian responded to her kiss with exquisite tenderness, his hands sliding into her hair as he deepened the connection. He kissed her slowly, carefully, as if she were infinitely precious and fragile. Cassie felt her entire body come alive with sensations she had never experienced. Her hands gripped his sweater, pulling him closer as she lost herself in the taste and feel of him. When they finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, Julian rested his forehead against hers. "That was your first real kiss," he said softly, wonder evident in his voice. "Yes," Cassie whispered, feeling tears prick at her eyes. "And it was perfect." Over the following weeks, their relationship unfolded with a natural beauty that surprised them both. Julian was patient and attentive, courting Cassie with a gentleness that made her feel cherished and valued. They took long walks on the beach, had deep conversations about everything from philosophy to marine biology, and slowly built a foundation of genuine friendship. Alongside their growing physical attraction, Julian attended her research presentations, asking thoughtful questions and showing genuine interest in her work. Cassie visited his office, learning about the innovative renewable energy projects he was developing. They discovered shared passions for environmental conservation, love of classical music, and dreams of making a positive impact on the world. The unexpected gift, their physical relationship developed gradually, with Julian respecting Cassie's inexperience and taking time to help her feel comfortable and desired. When they finally made love for the first time, in Julian's beach house with the sound of waves outside the windows, it was tender and profound. Nothing like the clinical arrangement they had originally discussed. Cassie discovered that intimacy with someone she truly cared for was transformative. Julian was patient and attentive, making sure she felt safe and cherished every step of the way. The experience left her feeling connected to him in ways that went far beyond the physical. 2 months after their first meeting, Cassie discovered she was pregnant. The news came as a surprise, even though pregnancy had been their stated goal. Standing in her bathroom, staring at the positive test, Cassie felt a complex mixture of joy, fear, and overwhelming love. When she told Julian that evening, his reaction erased any remaining doubts. He pulled her into his arms, tears streaming down his face as he whispered, "Thank you," over and over. His hands moved gently to her still flat stomach, and the tenderness in his touch made Cassie's heart swell with emotion. "I love you," Julian said, the first time he had spoken those words aloud. "Not because of this baby, though I'm grateful beyond words. I love you for who you are, for the way you see the world, for the courage it took to trust me." "I love you too," Cassie replied, realizing the truth of her words as she spoke them. "I never believed in love at first sight, but from the moment you walked into that conference room, something in me recognized something in you." A future beyond imagination, their wedding was small and intimate. Held on the beach where Cassie had agreed to Julian's proposition, Thomas walked her down the sandy aisle, beaming with fatherly pride. The ceremony was simple but profound, with vows they had written themselves that spoke of partnership, respect, and the courage to embrace unexpected possibilities. As Cassie's pregnancy progressed, their love deepened. Julian attended every doctor's appointment, read books on parenting, and transformed one of his home offices into a beautiful nursery. He continued to fund Cassie's research, but now with the understanding that it was part of supporting the woman he loved rather than fulfilling a business arrangement. Cassie discovered that being loved and cherished opened new dimensions of herself she had never known existed. She became more confident, more willing to take risks, more open to the beautiful sciences of human connection. Her research actually improved because she was no longer using it as a shield against life, but as a genuine passion she could share with someone who celebrated her achievements. On a spring morning, with cherry blossoms blooming outside the hospital windows, Cassie gave birth to a healthy baby girl. Julian was beside her throughout the labor, holding her hand and whispering encouragement. When the doctor placed their daughter in her arms, Cassie looked up at her husband through tears of joy and exhaustion. "We should name her Marina," Julian suggested softly, brushing a strand of sweaty hair from Cassie's forehead. "For the ocean that brought us together," Cassie nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. She looked down at Marina's tiny, perfect face, and then up at Julian, whose eyes held infinite love and gratitude. What had begun as an unconventional proposition between two lonely people had transformed into something neither could have planned or predicted. Their love had bloomed not despite the unusual circumstances of their meeting, but because they had both been brave enough to trust in possibility rather than logic. In the end, Cassie realized that the greatest discoveries weren't found in the ocean depths she had studied for so many years. The greatest discovery was learning that love, real and transformative love, required the courage to dive into unknown waters without knowing what you might find. And sometimes, when you took that leap of faith, you discovered treasures beyond anything you had ever imagined possible.